Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The longer the oil from BP's pipeline continues to gush into the Gulf of Mexico, the more Carol Lohr's phone rings hundreds of miles away in Morehead City.
We have had a few calls, folks that have reservations in July and August and September, and they're saying, you know, are we going to be okay? And of course, right at this point, we certainly feel like we're going to be okay.
But with the nation's worst oil spill now entering its 7th week, North Carolina's coastal communities are bracing for a new possibility. Some form of the crude could come close to their shores in the coming weeks.
In all the coastal counties, and certainly here in Carteret, it would just be devastating to our local economy and damaging to our shoreline. We have 90 miles of coastline.
The Gulf Stream comes up this way.
Up and down the coastline, marine researchers like Dr. Larry Cahoon of UNC Wilmington are keeping a close eye on the oil spill.
I've been getting a phone call from the Visitors Bureau director about once a week. We have never seen anything quite like this. This is a new one.
Last week, the National Center for Atmospheric Research released a computer simulation. It showed oil from the Gulf reaching the Atlantic coast as far north as Cape Hatteras over the next several weeks. Dr. Cahoon and other North Carolina researchers say that while the animation is no doubt dramatic, it's not an official forecast.
It's a slim chance that we'll get anything negative here. We're still a long way away from this. We have not yet seen oil come to the Florida Keys, and I wouldn't begin to get too terribly concerned about us until and unless you've got appreciable oil making it through the Florida Keys into the Gulf Stream south of Florida.
The fast-moving Gulf Stream traces the Atlantic coast roughly 60 miles offshore, and it's the current that could carry the oil to North Carolina. But it's also pretty unpredictable.
It's not like a highway, you know, where you're right between the lines all the time. It wiggles around out there and moves and shifts and so forth. An awful lot of stuff goes right past us and never comes inshore. The Gulf Stream circulation is a little bit unpredictable that way.
As the spill has worsened in the Gulf, so have the images of suffering wildlife. Cahoon and other researchers don't expect anything like that to make its way to the North Carolina coast.
My own guess is that we're likely to see some tar balls, some other signals like that, but unless something changes, we're not likely to see liquid oil at the surface getting up here. That's a long way to go, and liquid oil weathers, it disperses, it evaporates to some degree.
And tar balls are essentially what's left after all those processes take place.
I've seen them on the beaches here in years past, a few here and there. They're not uncommon. And they're like, you know, like little lumps of kind of a soft rock.
Cahoon says several different unlikely factors, like a major mass of oil sticking together and hitting a certain type of current, would have to line up perfectly to bring large quantities of oil here. The shrimp boats that sit still in Beaufort now could be in for a busy season this summer. With much of the Gulf shrimp supply contaminated, demand for North Carolina's product could be high this season, as long as the oil doesn't come this way.
In the short term, there may be a windfall for local domestic shrimp here in North Carolina.
But even though the boats could be busier and the fishermen a little better compensated, it's still far from an ideal situation.
You'd like to see your prices spike because of the demand for your product, because it's better product, not because someone else is having a catastrophe and a crisis like they're having in the Gulf. It's nothing that any of us take any joy in.
Over at the Crystal Coast Visitor Center, Carol Lohr's having a similar experience as she sees her colleagues in the Gulf losing vacationers because of the oil spill.
We've had quite a few couples from the Tennessee area that had reservations in the Gulf over the Memorial Day weekend and even the week before. And they have stopped by the Visitor Center and said, you know, we don't get much vacation time together, and we wanted to come someplace where we knew it would be clean, and they came here.
North Carolina's beaches are clean now, and most researchers expect they'll stay that way, but that doesn't mean emergency officials are taking the situation lightly.
As the interest has gone up, you know, all the emergency managers up and down the coastline have paid more attention and made sure we kept on top of what's actually happening in the Gulf.
The State Office of Emergency Management has a response plan for oil spills in place, But the command in any emergency response would come from the federal government.
The Coast Guard would be the lead federal agency, and State Emergency Management and the State Emergency Response Team would be the lead state agency.
Given the Gulf Stream's path, any oil that comes close to North Carolina isn't expected to travel north of Cape Hatteras. Even though shrimping may be good this season, Sean McKeon's worried about some of the larger species. They're caught in the Atlantic Ocean, but many of their lives begin in the Gulf of Mexico.
At the very time of this spill, that's the spawning season, particularly for bluefin tuna and some other species down there. So the concern is that it may affect eventually the markets up here, the fisheries up here.
The threat of the oil spill comes as North Carolina's coastal tourism economy starts to emerge some from a recession-plagued 2009.
Advanced reservations with our hotels and cottage condo rentals are ahead of where they were this time last year, so we feel like it's going to be a good season.
The summer months are no doubt critical ones for the cities of eastern North Carolina. Statewide tourism is worth about $22 billion a year.
It's huge. It's huge. It is our #1 industry here in Carteret County. We certainly want to protect our resources, and we depend on tourism. All of the coast does.
Sean McKeon's worried permanent damage to the Gulf shrimping industries could hurt North Carolina shrimp over the long term by turning more consumers onto imported shrimp. He's hoping the spill will bring more attention and favorable policies to the commercial fishing industry.
These are real people. These are families, generations of families. It has put a face to the public, to the American public, and most especially, hopefully, to the elected officials who are the only ones that can do anything to save this industry.